The Oklahoma City Thunder just keep on winning, including a win over the Boston Celtics. We'll talk about that, the week that was, preview the week ahead, and how good can this Thunder team get?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. On today's show, we're joined by Michael Martin at Michael on Sports. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube to discuss the week that was for the Thunder, preview the week ahead, and explore how good this Thunder team could be. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time and FanDuel. From the biggest upsets to the game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose, by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. Michael, Thunder win again. Is it surprising at all how they just keep on rolling, even with all of these tests?
I mean, I've got to say it's surprising because at some point you've got to feel like someone's going to get them and catch them, and it feels like every other game, whether it be the Knicks game or the Celtics game that we just had where they get down at halftime, it felt like this was the time. I mean, I'll raise my hand up and look stupid. I thought at halftime I was telling our good friend Derek Parker that I thought it was over. I thought the Thunder were losing it. I really liked how the Celtics were playing. They were the more physical team. Porzingis looked unstoppable. Jalen Brown wasn't really being guarded all that well. But just time and time again, this Thunder team just has a never say die attitude and just chips away, and in the end, they get the win. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that there were two different times in that Knicks game where I thought the game was over. I thought that the game was over, like you said, at halftime against the Celtics. And, credit to the Thunder because the Celtics game in particular, I picked against the Thunder. They were only 2-point favorites, and so every game day at Thunder and SI, we do a betting column, and I just picked the Celtics +2 because, number one, it felt like the Thunder were due for a loss. You're not going to keep this winning streak going forever. You're going to lose again at some point. It's an afternoon game, and you don't have Chet, Caruso, or A.J. Mitchell. And while you've been able to navigate without Chet, this was a matchup where you saw in the first half how much that Chet changes things for the Thunder and changes things against teams like the Celtics. And with A.J. Mitchell, you have an offense that was already laboring without Shai at times, and now you take out the best ball handler, the best table setter against the Celtics team that can really dig in defensively, and they still got down, 13 points, came back and won. I think that it's really a revolution or evolution of what Mark's been trying to do since he got here, of me having a team that is resilient, 0-0, all of his Markisms have really came to life within this specific group, and you see them continue to take on challenges. And you have a test on Wednesday that we're going to get into against Cleveland, where on paper, I don't see really any big argument for how the Thunder could win this game, but they're the Thunder, and they're going to have a chance. And if they win on Wednesday, I don't think either of us will be stunned that they win, even with all that's going to be going against them, which we're going to talk about coming up. But in particular, these two games against New York and Boston, I thought that those were going to be really tough challenges to overcome. I wasn't really that nervous, of course, against the Clippers or like against even the Timberwolves. But, man, when they got down these last two games, it was worrisome. And I think that Mark deserves credit, especially in that Knicks game and in the Celtics game. But, like, in the Knicks game, it would have been so easy to hit the panic button of, like, the Knicks are not going to their bench. We've got to kind of match that with our best because, like we said, their bench at that point was not playing well until it started playing well, whenever Wiggins couldn't miss and the rest of this bench kind of came alive. And so staying disciplined like that, what you saw was SGA comes back into the game with, the Thunder within a possession, and he's got fresh legs, and everyone on New York is gassed, and you'll sign up for that a billion times out of a billion with down two, Shai comes in fully rested, and the Knicks are gasping for air, and just let your MVP take over. To have that kind of restraint, to not just zag and disband in your plan, I thought was a testament of how good he is. And then, of course, on Sunday, moving Lou to Drew Holiday and all that he did in the second half, I thought was impressive too.
Yeah, Mark doesn't like the word adjustments. I don't know if he doesn't like flipping switches. I don't know if it's just a tweak or whatever he would call it. No, he doesn't like that. But they made some changes that have really worked in these past two games, just amping up the physicality on defense. And, this might be oversimplifying it, but to me, they're a defense first team that's just like, just get us to the last 2 minutes, and we think Shai can win it from there. And that's just how it feels for a lot of these games whenever it is close. I mean, they end up winning by double digits in like both of these games, so it doesn't really even follow that statement I just made, but that's what it feels like to me, because there are a lot of teams like the Knicks. They want to win with offense as much as they are a Tibbs team that's like usually defense identity. They put up a lot of points really, really fast, and I was impressed, just like you said, about, I wasn't stunned they won these games, but it was not only the wins, but the wins in the fashion that they came, in terms of like going out there, getting down by a little bit, because we wanted to see this team get challenged. We wanted to see them face some adversity. And in back-to-back games, not only do they get those challenges and face that adversity, but they come out on top.
Yeah, I think that this team is a second half team, and you can call it whatever you want. I mean, Mark doesn't like flipping switches. You can call it getting the car back on the road, which he goes to a lot, course correcting, which he goes to a lot. I think that part of the reason why they're a second half team is because of, one, I mean, they are a team that leans on their defense. And so defensively, you've got to kind of feel it out like a boxer in a prize fight of what the other team is trying to do, how the game is being officiated, like what level of physicality are you allowed to bring to this game, which physicality is required to bring to this game to win. And as a young team, they haven't been around the block a ton to know each and every game, what's going to be required of them and their personnel next to them. I mean, this is only Casey Wallace's, he's 1.25 way through the sun of the NBA. And so you have a lot of these young pieces who will take time to ease into the game and see the game unfold. And then to the Thunder's credit, they're able to take that information and implement it right away. They don't need to like drop one and then make the adjustments in an off day. They can really course correct in the midst of a game, which I find very impressive. And being a defensive focused team, again, that's more difficult to kind of implement from opening tip. Whereas offensively, for example, Steph Curry, he's gonna make threes in the first quarter, fourth quarter, whatever. Like he's just gonna go make threes, and the Warriors are gonna run that style. And so I think that the reason why the Thunder at times can like be like overly analyzed and overly picked apart compared to like these Celtics. So like everyone just knows that they're going to go and march their way through the playoffs. One, the Celtics have done it multiple times. But number two, being defensive focused, the defense stuff is like harder to see. Like you've got to really be like locked into the game to see what they're doing defensively. Whereas like if they were a number one offensive team and a number 7 defensive team, then you would just be like gawking at what J-Dub's doing, what Shai's doing, etc. And so you can kind of pick that stuff apart. But I think that this Thunder team, for as good as they've been, this is not their A-plus stuff yet.
No, not at all. I thought some guys definitely could play better. And speaking to your point about offense versus defense, I think there's a real feeling around NBA teams, or just talking about NBA teams, of like, there are a lot of really good defenses that we've seen in the past decade, but they just can't get over the hump because of a lack of offense. And I think that's what most people are sort of scared about, is you look at like sort of those like old SEC football teams where it's like, we'll hold you to 10, but can we also score 13? And you don't really know. But the Thunder defensively have really, really amped it up, and defense travels. Offense, there's a lot of variance with that and volatility, but the thing is with the Thunder, when you have a defense like that, which they amped it up in the second half, obviously, so I think they're consistently good, but they have spurts where they can really be great. And then offensively, you have Shai, who's the most consistent star in the NBA. You're going to give yourself a really, really good chance to win just against about anybody. But yeah, no, not an A-plus game from them. Lou Dort starts out ice cold. Isaiah Hartenstein had a good game statistically. Like the numbers weren't just eye-popping. Isaiah Joe made a couple of shots, wasn't just super, super impressive. J-Dub, another sort of tough night for him against the Celtics. He played really good defense, but offensively wasn't hitting it. So, yeah, I saw some of the talk online. It's like, well, the Thunder are playing their A++ game, and they beat the Celtics, who are playing whatever schedule, this, and excuse X and Y. But the reality is the Thunder definitely could play a lot better, and I think fans who have been watching this team this year and last year really, really know that, because obviously they don't have Chet and Caruso, but even with the guys playing, there were definitely shots left on the table that they could have made.
Yeah, and coming up, we're going to talk about how this Thunder team can get a lot better. But you mentioned defense travels, and what also travels specifically defensively, it's not just the turnovers, but it's the half-court defense. Like against Boston, who has all the pieces and, as you saw in the first half, all the mismatches. Their half-court offense was in the 19th percentile yesterday against Oklahoma City. They only scored 84.9 points per play. Like, it was dreadful. Now, granted, the Thunder's half-court offense was not much better. It was on the 37th percentile, scoring 93 points per play. But with Boston, that includes their first half, like where they were just on fire, and they still had their numbers drugged down that far by what this Thunder defense is able to do. And so in the playoffs, when the game slows down, it is more of a half-court style. It's just another measurement of, hey, this defense is legit. They're not capitalizing on like teams that roll in and don't really care. They're not capitalizing on lazy regular season passes, or just anything like that. They're really going at the best in, playoff settings where like you're going to be playing half-court offense in the playoffs and still being very disruptive. But the most fun part of this 15-game winning streak and this start for the Thunder is that neither one of us believe that this is who they are, and that's a good thing. They're going to get better. We'll tell you how coming up. But first, I want to say right now, but our good friends over at FanDuel, go check out FanDuel today, because from the big upsets to the game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs is here and better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets. Guaranteed, that's $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need, from live betting to same-game parlays and so much more. You can go there right now and check them out. For example, you can also bet on the NBA, where you can go see the lines over there whenever you visit FanDuel.com to join today and get $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Win or lose on your first bet. Make the playoffs unforgettable with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. But also, they do have the NBA, where you can see the Mavericks are 4.5-point underdogs in Memphis. So go check that out today at FanDuel.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day, talking to Michael Martin at Michael on Sports. Let's talk Thunder on YouTube. Michael, this Thunder team can still get a lot better. And the obvious, we'll just start with Chet coming back. And I think that Chet coming back just unlocks new levels for a multitude of things. First of all, defensively, not only can you play them together, we don't have to get into that a ton if you don't want to, but just the basic fact of being able to play a legitimately good center for 48 minutes is something that this team has never experienced. They've never gotten to play two centers, much less two top 10 centers, two top 12 centers, whichever one of those two you like more. They are for sure top 12. I'd say top 10 centers in Hartenstein and Chet. And that is just such a luxury of your back-end defense that, again, you've never had the luxury of. But another important thing, I think, is what Chet does for J-Dub. And I don't want to give J-Dub a totally get-out-of-jail-free card, because he does have to be better offensively. But one way that I think that Chet helps J-Dub over Hartenstein, and where you could maybe see the Mark stagger it this way, where when it's only J-Dub on the court, Chet's his big man, and when it's only Shai on the court, Isaiah Hartenstein's his big man, is because with Hartenstein, yes, he sets amazing screens, and he's a better screen setter than Chet Holmgren. When those screens finish, though, Hartenstein is where? At the elbow, drifting into the paint, toward the rim. He never really rolls that hard to the rim, but he's in that vicinity. Whereas with Chet, it is going to be more of a ghost screen and a slip screen, and it's not going to throw a defender completely off route to J-Dub. But where does Chet go after he lays his screen? To the three-point line. And so either someone's going to follow Chet to the three-point line, which then opens up the mid-range and the rim, or nobody's going to follow Chet to the three-point line, which opens up a really easy, quick decision for J-Dub out of the pick and roll to get him the ball, get an easy shot. And you do that a couple times, then people do start to follow Chet. Then you see what you saw last year, where then it's just one-on-one, J-Dub in the mid-range, getting to his spots and being able to have more efficient shots. And then he looks a lot better offensively when Chet comes back. So again, not to take everything off of J-Dub, because he does need to be better with or without Chet, but that is a real big way how he can be better just by simply having Chet back.
Yeah, it's going to clear things out, where it's just going to come down to Dub making shots or missing them, because right now they are a little bit more contested than they would be with Chet. But mentioning how they can get better, talking about the two-man big lineups, which I'm really interested in. Defensively, I think it's going to be a total game changer for this team in terms of what they can do, where now you can have a rim protector at the rim at all times. You can't space one out, or you have like Porzingis last night where he goes and spaces to the corner. Hartenstein has to go chase him out there, and then it leaves the rim a little bit more open and weak for opponents to attack. And then offensively, I'm really interested because Hartenstein offensively doesn't take away from anything that Chet does, because Chet is not, as we all know, not a traditional big man. He's not going to post up at the elbow or the block or do anything like that. And so Hartenstein can still do all the stuff he normally does, hanging around the elbows, passing, playing the pick and roll game with Shai. Like, you might even get into some actions where you see a two-man game between those two guys, between Chet and Isaiah, which I'd be really interested in. I think you're going to see Isaiah throw some lobs to Chet, but I think that this is just going to add a whole new dimension for this team. That doesn't mean it's going to get actualized immediately, but I think the ceiling just goes up an entirely new level.
Yeah, and part of that can be like, Chet's only had 1 year of NBA experience, but in that 1 year, when he was on the court, he was really just used as a screener in some form. Like, there wasn't a ton of off-ball cutting from Chet that he could really benefit from. Whereas with Hartenstein, you can envision like Chet starting in the corner, Hartenstein starting at the elbow. The guard brings the ball to the floor, puts it inside the Hartenstein at the elbow. Hartenstein has his back to the basket. Chet cuts. Hartenstein finds him, and like that's just created two easy points. And it's spoon-fed Chet a little bit. It's gotten Hartenstein the assist, and it's gotten your offense an easy look. Like, you could start to see Chet's cutting be incorporated more with Hartenstein being back and him not having to be the one that's tethered to the ball handler. And, of course, you can cut off of a Hartenstein screen and a pick and roll on the back end. Like, that kind of stuff is really interesting. And then defensively, the most interesting part is, like, Chet getting to play that Jaren Jackson Jr. role. And, like, not to discount Hartenstein, because I've been thoroughly impressed with what Hartenstein's done when he switched onto an island outside. I think the Chet's still a bit better outside, like the one I would trust more outside on an island than Hartenstein, even though Hartenstein's been good. So, like, now you have Hartenstein at the rim. Chet's kind of just roaming around and can play on the perimeter, and then we know what he can do in terms of recovery. Like, he had, of all of his amazing blocks last year, he had a ton that were in recovery and chasing down a shot, even in the half court. So that opens up a whole new level. My only concern or question, I guess it's not really a concern, but I wonder how much you can accomplish both goals. Because I think that one of the goals is you always have a center on the court. And not to say that Thunder just outright abandoned small ball, but like, for example, against the Mavericks, where they have Lively and Gafford to throw at you, you always want to match those minutes with a true big. So how much can you get away with playing both of them and accomplish the goal of always having a big on the floor? Like, what does that stagger look like? Is it possibly the best form to stagger it, just starting the game with those two and then quickly removing one? But I don't know. That's the stuff that I think will be so interesting to figure out, and why I think that, like, winning and stringing these wins together is so important right now, because you can get to a point where when Chet comes back, let's just call it, March 13th or whatever, when Chet comes back, the number one seed is pretty much solidified. Whereas, like, on opening night this year, we thought that it would be another dogfight where you're looking at tiebreakers, you're looking at one game. You could have it pretty wrapped up to where now you can get back to roster exploration and experiments without it really costing you anything, but gaining you a ton of data for the playoffs.
Yeah, you're going to have plenty of time to just mess around, just see what things look like. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think they ever just abandon small ball completely. But in a lot of ways, like, Chet, obviously, height-wise, length-wise, is a center, but he does a lot of the small ball things that the Thunder like, in terms of he's a spacer, he runs the floor, he creates mismatches that way. So I don't think that they're going to just go all bigs all the time. I think that you're going to see them more times than not, but I'm really excited to see just how Mark sort of just tinkers and plays with some of these things, because like you said, they have enough of a cushion right now where we know the Thunder, they're not going to mess around, but they are going to have time to sort of just test some things out and maybe get some guys more comfortable. Like we've seen Dub in a little bit of a slump. You got a couple months, maybe you get him, maybe work out all the kinks and you get out of that. But for now, I'm just really excited about how this team's playing. There's obviously things you can nitpick, but I don't know, one of the points I wanted to make was back in the day when the team wasn't very good, we and then fans would also just look at the bright side. Thunder would lose by 70 and we'd go, well, this guy played really well. Whereas now they're winning so much that I feel like people are looking for the one or two things that they're doing really poorly and just hammering those as hard as possible, when in reality they're not as big life-changing issues as maybe what it looks like from the outside.
Yes, especially because no matter how good you are, you're not going to be a perfect team. I mean, you can go back and like check out Locked On Celtics from this time last year. They end up winning the championship. There were concerns for that Celtics team, even for as great as they were last year and really going wire to wire as the favorites and the undisputed, like, oh, those guys are going to walk into a title. They still had concerns. They still had things to figure out. So it's not unheard of that the Thunder have things to figure out, but it's also not like going to doom them when it comes time to play. One of the things is their three-point shooting. They go from the number one team last year in terms of percentages to now they're bottom half of the league in percentages. Part of that is due to them living up to the promise of increased volume, but also part of it is shot variance, which I don't believe will continue to trend negatively through the rest of this season. Now, I don't know when it will turn, but look at a guy like Alex Caruso, who shot 40% last year. And maybe you think that the 40% is fake. I'll give you that, sure. But this year, he's shooting 26%. And so his career, he's shooting 37%. I don't think he got 10% worse from three, especially with the quality of looks that the Thunder generate for him. I think that it's a tough 20-game sample, and whenever he returns, like, you could easily convince me that he will shoot the ball a lot better. Isaiah Joe is shooting 35% from three this year. He shot 41% from three last year, and his career is 39%. So, like, there's still ways, of course, for Isaiah Joe to get better. And Isaiah Joe, like, throughout his career in Oklahoma City, he's been a slow starter. He's had very poor Decembers, not as poor as this one was, but he's had poor Decembers before that he's been able to overcome. And then Cason Wallace, like, we only have a one-year sample size of him. And yes, I do not believe that he's a 42% three-point shooter because he was 41.9 last year. I don't believe he was a 42% three-point shooter, but I also don't believe he's a sub-30 three-point shooter at all. So, like, if you start to see those things turn around, then offense gets a lot easier. You're still, for as much offensive complaints as you have, shooting and J-Dub, like, you're still a top 10 offense. And if he starts to shoot the ball better, that's another area where it attributes to what we don't believe that this is the best version of themselves because they haven't done those things, which we think that they can do.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think this team's a bad offense. I will say I think there's some level of them being carried by Shai, sort of like James Harden with the Rockets, where he was just sort of a one-man top five offense in a way, where Shai has just been so spectacular, which is a good problem to have that you have a guy who's that good. But I'm with you in terms of the shooting variance, where there are just too many guys who are just much better than what they're shooting. They had some outlier shooting seasons last year. Like, anyone holding Aaron Wiggins to shooting 52% from three, sorry, that was a dumb decision. That's not how it works. But there are opportunities for these guys to get better, and I think that Chet will really help as well, just having another floor spacer, especially at the five, where you have more of these drive and kick opportunities are going to be a little bit more open. But, that's what actually makes this winning streak so impressive, is because there hasn't been a game other than, like, Wiggins the other night against the Knicks where it feels like a real true outlier performance of a three-point shooter. Like, even Lou Dort last night, it was wild to watch, but it didn't feel like an out-of-body experience, like, I can't believe this is happening sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think that the Wiggins outlier game was actually really encouraging to me because the playoffs last year, Shai got whatever he wanted. You did the very best job of anybody of taking away Luka and Kyrie for as much as you can take those two away. They're phenomenal players. They're still going to go get theirs, but by their standards, you took them away. And the difference was the Mavericks had guys who are willing to shoot. And being willing to shoot got them the PJ Washington games and got them the win. Whereas the Thunder had guys who were wide open and kept passing the ball away and would kind of fumble away possessions that way. And seeing Wiggins, who has been in and out of the rotation, in and out of the starting lineup, and in particular in big games, he has not played a ton. He's played like 9 minutes per game in what we would classify as big games. To see him have that confidence against New York and thus get rewarded with an outlier game, like, that's the kind of stuff you need, man, to win a championship. Like, it's not going to be everybody, all the role players play around their level and the superstars play around their level. You're going to need that variance from your role players and someone with confidence to deliver, because whenever you get to the playoffs, especially, and your game plan for each and every day, they're going to start to leave those guys open, just like you left PJ Washington open, not because you think that they're terrible players or like you think that Wiggins is a terrible player, but because I'd rather get beat by PJ Washington than get beat by a guy who is an MVP and a guy who has won a championship before. And so whenever they are picked on to be the ones to beat you, they've got to have that confidence to actually go beat you. I thought that was a really improved sign from Wiggins that he was able to do that against New York.
Yeah, and just looking through NBA history, it seems like almost every year when there's a team that really makes a deep run, they have at least one role player who's an outlier shooter, like PJ Washington, like you mentioned, Caleb Martin a few years ago for the Heat. Like, heck, your Mavs team with Dirk, when they finally won the championship, like, they had a number of guys I'm sure you could mention. But that's just sort of the deal. And for the Thunder, in a very literal sense, it's about wanting to take the shot of, I want to take this. I'm taking this ball, and I'm going to make sure that, I'm the one shooting it here, because there's some element, like you mentioned, the Thunder just kind of keeping the ball moving to keep it moving, where there needs to be some aspect of, that's why I love Lou Dort, what he did the other night, where some guys, it's like, let's try to get the perfect shot here, and Lou Dort's like, screw it, I'll do it. And there has to be some element of just riskiness, of risk-taking, and just not being afraid to miss. And sure, you're going to have some games where he goes 0 for 8 in the first half like he did, but that's what's really cool about him, is that he's not going to just, punt and just give up.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right, and I just think that it's a credit to Shai, too. Mark's pointed this out a few times. Shai himself has talked about reflecting on that Mavs series and wanting to give his teammates, be put in better position, give them more confidence. And Mark's pointed out examples of, J. Will, who was shooting dreadfully against the Clippers, but yet here Shai is passing it to him when he's open, even if it's early in the shot clock. Whereas, one criticism of, Shai, if you wanted to go there, was, last year, he was just sticking to the ball more, and it would work out. I mean, this guy walked into an efficient 30-plus point night every single night. It's not really a criticism, but it's just a difference of, this year, he's still getting his numbers. He's still doing it very efficiently. The ball's not sticking to him. He's not passing as a last resort. Let's put it that way. He's not passing because, the double came and I have nothing to do. He's passing because somebody's open, and he's going to live with the result of, and sometimes the ball rims out on J. Will. Sometimes, you've instilled that trust and confidence in Wiggins, and the ball goes in 4 times in a row, and you're feeling really good. But the decision-making from Shai, I think, has been part of this revolution for some of these role players who have had big nights like Wiggins. But coming up, the Thunder outdid our predictions last time, and they might do it again this week. We'll talk about this week ahead for the Thunder. But first, I want to say right now, my good friends over at Prize Picks, go check out Prize Picks today, because basketball season is heating up. There's no better way to get real money action than when you're watching your favorite NBA stars with Prize Picks. Whether you're a diehard fan or just loving the competition, Prize Picks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You think LeBron's going to drop 30 points? Maybe Luka's going to get more than 8 assists? Prize Picks can let you make those predictions and turn them into money, where you can put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. I love using Prize Picks. Michael uses Prize Picks. It's available in Oklahoma. Go check it out today. You can use it all season long. It's very addictive, very fun. But pick Jason Tatum for more than 29 points and Anthony Edwards for more than 25 points. And if that comes together, boom, you're able to win, including with the Prize Picks flex play option. So even if one pick doesn't hit with the flex play, you can still double your money. Plus, once you hit, you get the money fast, sometimes as quick as 15 minutes. So right now is the perfect time to join. Go download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. Win or lose, you put a $5 lineup in, and boom, you get a guaranteed $50 at Prize Picks. Run your game. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I'm your host, Rylan Stiles. Joining us today is Michael Martin at Michael on Sports on Twitter. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. Michael, we've been making these predictions. We've been pretty good at them, but the Thunder, to their credit, did surpass the expectations when they went and rattled off wins against Minnesota, the Clippers, New York, and Boston. But now they've got another tough week. It's Cleveland, New York, and Washington. Yeesh. That's going to be really tough. This is the most cryptic I've felt about a stretch that since we've been doing this. But where are you at on this 3-game stint?
So you're counting the Cavs, the Knicks, and then Washington, and not Philly in this one?
Nope.
Okay, just making sure. I'm going to say 2-1 in this one. I think that the Thunder have gotten a big boost from the home crowd, and I think that either against the Cavs or the Knicks, if you make me pick one, I will, but I think that they finally get caught up a little bit here because the reality is they can't win forever. If they win forever, then we're having very, very different conversations, but I would be happy to be wrong if they keep winning and they go 3-0 in this stretch, but it feels like at some point they're going to get caught in one of these matchups, especially because they have been playing really well in second halves and making these comebacks, but at some point it's either not going to be there for that spark or you're going to dig too deep of a hole, and you're playing against two really, really good teams in the Cavaliers, and then we saw what the Knicks did here in Oklahoma City, and now you're going to be playing in their arena, but I'm going to go with 2-1.
So I really like 2-1. I would like anything except for 3-0. I do not think that they can go 3-0, and if they do, I'll have egg on my face, and that'd be a fun time for you guys in the comment section. But I just look at that Cavs game, and I really don't see a path for the Thunder winning as currently constructed with what the Cavs can do in the front court and what the Thunder can't do in the front court right now. And I think that that's going to be a cause for like a ton of freak out. But again, I would kind of caution you of like, this is not the same song and dance as last year. Help is on the way. Like they have the other big, like they have their form of Allen and Mobley. It's just that one of their bigs is hurt. And so like that's going to hamper them in this matchup. And I think that it would take Shai playing at a all-time great level, which he is, but it'd also take a outlier, incredible shooting night, which can happen technically because the game hasn't been played yet. But typically, role players don't have those kind of performances on the road, and so I just can't really bank on that. And then with the stretch that J-Dub's had offensively, I can't really bank on him being a scoring option against Mobley and Allen inside, and I don't know that they can get him enough catch and shoot threes to make up for it that are open on the perimeter. So I just don't really see a world that they beat Cleveland, which me saying that will make them go beat Cleveland now, and all the comments will come back to this video. And then in New York, I think it's going to be really tough to beat a good team twice in a week. It's just the Madison Square Garden effect, though. Like, would it stun you if Shai goes for 50 in the Garden and J-Dub goes for 25 and, like, breaks out of this slump just because they're playing in this magical Garden? It worked for, Trey Mann once upon a time, so maybe it can work for two more talented players. I'll go 2-1 because it's so hard to predict that the Thunder will go on, like, losing streaks because they don't really ever do that dating back to last year. But I could easily foresee this being a 1-3 week, 1-2 week, I should say, 1-2 week, and we're like having people freak out. But honestly, if we're gonna do what I think will happen, it'll be 2-1. If we're gonna do what we usually do, which is like what's an acceptable outcome, I do think that 1-2 is acceptable.
Yeah, I'd say it's acceptable. Maybe just in terms of the types of loss that they are. If there are a couple blowouts, obviously that changes the context a little bit. I think that probably the baseline is 2-1. I don't think that they're the type of team that just drops consecutive ones like you mentioned. I mean, they're on a 15-game win streak, 14, whatever it is, for a reason, so they're not really losing a lot anyways. But I think that could ignite a couple things, because I think there is some element of, like, there's only so much you can improve on and fix when you're winning like this. I think there's some truth to losing to then implement whatever you think is the next thing to really improve your team. So I think it's either the Cavs game or the Knicks game, but I think the Thunder do get caught up. But in the end, in the long grand scheme of things, I think it actually could be good for this team to kind of, I don't know, be behind the eight ball in a different way coming off a loss, and I'd be interested to see how they respond.
Yeah, I think that it'll be a fun week, and no matter what the scoreboard says, it'll be a week that the Thunder can learn from and can implement. Because to the Thunder's credit, like it is hard to really, improve a ton whenever you're winning, because it just feels like you don't need to. But this Thunder team does a good job of living up to their coach speak. Like most teams just give you lip service. I really do buy into this team, like truly being 0-0 and like good, bad, or ugly. No matter if they won or lost, they still dive into every single game and improve from it and their experiences. So I'm just excited to see what they look like. Now, I wanted to ask you this, and this is going to be sprung on you. So if you need time, I can do mine. But regardless of record, this is not about who's at the top of the standings. This is a power ranking of teams that you think can win a championship this year. what's your top four?
In any order or just the top
So
four?
like your top four of like number one, that's who you'd bet on to win a championship. Number two, like you know that is and down the line.
I'll go with the Celtics at 1 just because the East is going to be easier, I think. The Thunder at 2, the Cavaliers at 3, and then that 4th spot is really, really tough just because like the Mavs had so many injuries and Jokic is a really good player, but he has no supporting cast. I'll just go with the Mavs and just bank on them having some injury luck, but I think that the Thunder at 2 makes a lot of sense because I think they're probably the most talented team, but it just, as always, is a gauntlet going through the West.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with the Celtics, Thunder, Cavs, Knicks because I think that the Knicks, talking to some friends in New York, it sounds like perhaps the Thunder game was a wake up call with like, hey, we're good enough to go compete with the top of the NBA, but we're not good enough to do that if you continue to run our guys into the ground. And it's like perhaps you see them zag a little bit and like sacrifice some regular season wins in favor of being more healthy and fresh come playoff time whenever you do have to play like you did against Oklahoma City, where you're just playing your top 5 guys 40-plus minutes a night. And making it through a month that way or 2 months that way is really tough to do. But, man, do they have like the talent and the ability to. So that's why I put them in the 4 spot. Cleveland, my only concern with Cleveland is the guard play of small guards on defense. But I'll give them credit. Like, if you actually go watch Cleveland, yes, no one's going to confuse them with like Lou Dort and Caruso and Wallace. Like they're not good defenders, but they aren't just out there dying and like olaying and letting guys pass them. They're putting up a fight and they're not dying on screens. Like they're staying in front to the best of their ability, and they're getting the benefit of funneling it inside to Allen and Mobley to where their defense can still play winning basketball. But the Celtics, man, I don't care what their regular season record is. I don't care if somehow they finished like the 4th seed in the East. Like to me, they're still the best team in basketball, and they're going to be a team that can peak at the right time and peak in the playoffs. And then the Thunder, they have all the parts to do it. You just got to go actually do it. And so we'll see if they can do it. So that's why we both have them at 2. But, I just think that sometimes people can get swept up in the standings a bit. Like the Cleveland being the number 1 team in the NBA to me doesn't even make them close to the title favorites. Like they're not number 1 for me or number 2 for me to win a championship. But just something fun to do to end the show. Michael, let them know what you are cooking up at Let's Talk Thunder.
Well, I'm trying to do a quick flip here where I'm going to try to get this out sometime on Tuesday or, I'm going to get it by Tuesday or Wednesday before the game. But it's just going to be about big game Lou Dort and just sort of him coming through in a lot of different contexts. I mean, it all starts with the bubble in Game 7 and how that's sort of been his reputation. I talked to Shai about that the other night. And just sort of his two-way performance shutting down Jalen Brown. But you can look forward to that. And then still working on the A.J. Mitchell piece, which should come out sometime late this week, early next week.
Go check that out. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. I'm Michael on Sports on Twitter. I'm at Rylan_Stiles on Twitter. And, of course, Locked on Thunder anywhere you get your podcast from. Until next time, be good and be good to one another.